Here's another little thing on forgiveness. I had a wonderful doctor teach me. He was a counselor, but I didn't go to for counseling. We were at a conference together, and he taught me different little secrets, really, of how to connect with me. So we call it the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit is there, but he's helping me figure out me because I'm where the problem is. And so some people forgive themselves for everything so easy, but we need to hold ourselves accountable. At the same time, if you did something 10 years ago, how many years are you going to suffer for it? Now, Jesus has forgiven you. You might have known he's forgiven you, but you can't forgive yourself. So you use your mouth. In each of these cases, forgiveness, you must use your mouth. You don't have to have other people listen to you. You go privately and say, I forgive me. Now, that's not going to totally unlock you, but there might be, rather than just generally me, what is it specifically that you must forgive? And it's usually something before you were saved. It can be something after you're saved, but guess what? You're really being unbiblical if you're trying to forgive yourself for something that you did before you were saved, because Jesus wiped it off his slate. Afterwards, yes, you do have to confess it to him. But we're not talking about that this morning. We're talking about holding it. I've seen healing stopped. I've seen victory stopped. Depression comes. You want to know if you're fighting depression? It could be that you're holding things against you or God. Because everything I'm going to tell you about holding resentment against you or unforgiveness against yourself works the same. But a lot of people don't say, I've got resentment towards God. They actually do. But they don't want to say it because it doesn't sound very Christian. But when you and God talk alone, you can say, Lord, am I holding something against you? Sometimes it's something we didn't do, something that we didn't do, and now we feel guilty about it. So we're holding against God that he should have done it. He should have forced us to do it. Sometimes it's things that we just felt should have gone differently. We were believing for something, expecting something, and something went wrong. And we don't really want to say, God, we think you let us down, but we do. And he doesn't mind us because he can handle that. And that may not get solved. You may never understand it. There's a lot of things in the world you just have to put on the shelf and say, Lord, I'm putting that on the shelf. But Lord, if I've held something against you, see how that would weaken your prayer life? If you can't trust him, then how can you go to him if you say, well, I've prayed before? So people get out of fellowship. And the same thing is with you, the same thing with God and you. And we're not talking about other people now. We talked about them last week, going one by one by one and saying, Lord, am I holding something? And then again, remember specifically, if you can remember the specific thing, you go back to that moment with the Lord and with that person in your mind. You don't call that person up. You go back to that moment when you did something wrong that's really haunting you. And you go back in your mind and you say, Holy Spirit, come back with me. I've gone back to when I was 7 years of age. I didn't do anything wrong, but I held a resentment against myself because of the way something went. And then the Holy Spirit, and that affected me way into my 20s. It just kind of sat there bugging me. And then Holy Spirit and I went back, and I went back in that memory, and I said, Lord, what would you do? And then the Lord just said, all I do is get up and walk away. But see, I was a kid. I didn't know to walk away. And then I walked away. I didn't do anything wrong, but I held it against myself. God hasn't done anything wrong, but we're holding something against him. Say, Lord, if I'm holding something against me, just remind me what it could be. Then you and him go back to that. Don't expect answers. What you're trying to do is not get answers. You're trying to get freedom because you don't want to be connected to old debts. You want to be loosed from old debts. You want to loose others from old debts. You don't want to be a debt collector. You don't want to be a judge. You want to be standing and interceding for people. So what are we going to do? We're going to say, Lord, could I be holding something against you? And then wait for your inner man. Wait for the Holy Spirit and be honest. If you're honest, Holy Spirit will talk to you. Am I holding something against me? Then sometimes you can't go right at it. You've got to work at other people. And as I said, always work at the ones that's the easiest to forgive first. Put that list down. You got anger, depression. Those are things often connected to unforgiveness. Sometimes there's things that you thought God told you to do and it didn't happen, or you thought God promised you and it didn't happen. Guess what? Go back to that and say, Lord, I'm disappointed. And see, disappointed can often go into depression. And then it can go into a deep discouragement. Because see, God's for you. God is for you. Now say it with my mouth, your mouth, God is for me. God is for me. God is with me. And say this, God's going to use me. Come on, say, God is going to use me, but I got to get free. God is going to use me, but I got to get free.